Hey guys, tonight we slip backward in time as the sun claws its way over the eastern edge of the Nile, flooding everything with a white-hot glare that feels less like morning and more like a warning. You open your eyes expecting your usual ceiling fan, maybe the soft glow of a phone screen, but instead you're staring up at a sky so clear and vast it feels almost aggressive. The air is already warm, thick with river moisture and dust, and your body instantly realizes something is very wrong. Somewhere nearby, and livelihoods, a donkey writes personally offended by your existence, and the smell of mud, reeds, and smoke settles into your nose. Welcome to ancient Egypt, day 1, and you probably won't survive this. Before you can even sit up, sweat beads along your neck. This isn't forgot to turn on the AC. Heat. This is a sun that means business, a sun the ancient Egyptians worshipped as a god because honestly, what else would you do when something that powerful shows up every single day? Ray is already climbing, and you feel like an ant under a magnifying glass. And livelihoods. Historians still argue whether the average ancient Egyptian experienced heat stress daily or simply adapted over generations, but your modern body is not impressed either way. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, drop a comment where you're listening from and what the local time is. Somewhere out there, it's probably cool and dark, and you should appreciate that privilege. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push yourself upright on a rough woven mat, reeds poking your skin like they're testing you. Around you, the village is already alive. That's your first shock. No slow mornings here. Ancient Egypt runs on sunlight, not alarms. People wake early because once the sun is high, movement becomes exhausting and dangerous. Farmers, scribes, laborers, everyone tries to get ahead of the heat. You, meanwhile, are still mentally asking where your coffee is. Spoiling there is no coffee. That won't exist for another couple thousand years. Instead, if you're lucky, there's beer. Warm, thick, slightly sour beer. Breakfast of champions. The Nile glints in the distance, deceptively peaceful. This river is everything. Food source, highway, calendar, and occasional nightmare. Every year it floods, depositing rich black silt that makes farming possible. That's a mainstream historical fact and one of the reasons Egypt could support such a long-lasting civilization. But here's the quirky tidbit. They didn't just thank the river. They structured their entire concept of time around it. The year was divided according to flooding, planting, and harvesting. If the flood was bad, famine followed. No pressure, Nile. As you stand, barefoot on cool mud that will soon become scorching, you notice how people look. Many have shaved heads or cropped hair. It's not a fashion statement, it's survival. Less hair means fewer lice, and lice here are not a minor inconvenience. They're practically a lifestyle. Some priests even removed all body hair as a ritual act of cleanliness. You, however, are rolling in with your modern immune system and whatever microbes hitched a ride with you through time. Your odds, let's call them optimistic but fragile, like a paper umbrella in a sandstorm. Clothing is minimal. Line wraps, light and breathable, hang loosely from shoulders and hips. It looks comfortable until you realize it offers almost no sun protection. Ancient Egyptians compensated with oils and pastes rubbed into the skin. One commonly mentioned mixture included animal fat and, yes, sometimes crocodile-dung. Before you panic, historians still argue whether that particular ingredient was practical insect repellent or just symbolic ritual medicine. Either way, you're not thrilled about applying it. SPFG questionable. The sun continues rising and with it comes noise. Wooden tools knock against stone. Voices shout greetings and instructions. Somewhere, a scribe carefully unrolls papyrus, mentally preparing to track grain or labor quotas. Literacy exists here, but it's rare and powerful. If you can read and write, you are valuable. If you can't, you work with your body. There is no finding yourself. phase, no gap year. Your role is decided early, usually by your parents' status. Social mobility does happen occasionally, another mainstream fact, but it's about as common as finding shade at noon. You catch sight of a small shrine near a doorway, a simple offering bread, maybe a flower, a whispered prayer. Religion isn't something you do on weekends here. It's baked into every action. You don't just wake up. You survive because the gods allow it. Forget to show respect, and misfortune suddenly feels personal. And given how precarious life already is, you don't need extra cosmic beef. Already your body is sending complaints. Dry mouth, tight skin, hunger mixed with unease. This is only the first hour of the day. You haven't worked yet. You haven't eaten yet. You haven't offended anyone important yet, though statistically that's coming. Remember this moment, this quiet panic under the rising sun. This is the baseline. Everything from here on out gets harder. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a modern thought floats up. Unhelpful but persistent, you miss your bed. Funny enough, ancient Egyptians loved sleep too. Beds existed, wooden frames with woven supports, but they were for the wealthy. Most people slept on mats like yours. No pillows, just carved headrests that looked wildly uncomfortable. Historians still argue whether these were ergonomic or just another example of ancient people being built differently. As the day truly begins, and livelihoods, you realize ancient Egypt doesn't care that you're new. The sun won't slow down, the river won't explain itself, and the people around you expect you to know your place, your job and your gods, immediately. Day one isn't about adventure, it's about endurance, and right now, endurance is already slipping through your sweaty fingers. You don't get a gentle adjustment period. Your body makes that very clear within the first few hours, as if it's filing a formal complaint against you for time travel-related negligence. The heat from earlier doesn't fade, it settles in, heavy and personal, like it has your name on it. Your mouth feels dry no matter how often you swallow, and livelihoods. And your stomach begins that low, uncertain churn that means it's already questioning today's decisions. Welcome to the part where your own biology becomes your biggest liability. Ancient Egyptians, on average, ate a diet built around bread and beer. That sounds comforting until you actually encounter it. The bread is dense, coarse, and full of grit. Literal grit. Stone ground flour often contained tiny fragments of the grinding stones which slowly wore down teeth over a lifetime. This is a mainstream historical fact confirmed by mummies with teeth ground nearly flat. You take a bite, and your jaw immediately files a noise complaint. Dental care exists, sort of, but pain management does not. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians simply tolerated tooth pain or whether social expectations discouraged complaints. Either way, you are already dreaming of toothpaste. Your stomach, used to processed foods and refrigeration, is now negotiating with bacteria it has never met before. Parasites are common here. Worms from undercooked fish, contaminated water or soil. You don't see them, but they're enthusiastic. Ancient medical texts describe treatments for intestinal worms that involve honey herbs and spoken spells, which tells you two things: O's and livelihoods. They knew the problem existed, and they didn't have great solutions. This is where that quirky tidbit slides in. Some remedies involved drinking beer mixed with crushed plants that were supposed to drive out illness. Whether that worked or just made people feel better is still up for debate. Hydration becomes an obsession. You drink when you can, but the water is always suspect. The Nile looks calm, almost inviting, but it's full of microorganisms your body is not prepared to party with. Ancient Egyptians often diluted beer with water or drank outright because fermentation killed some pathogens. So yes, people here drink beer all day, including children. Before you get jealous, remember it's low alcohol, warm, and slightly chunky. Think liquid bread with trust issues. Your immune system is also having a moment. You're exposed to diseases that were common then but long eliminated or controlled in your time. Schistosomiasis, for example, A parasitic disease carried by freshwater snails was widespread along the Nile. Mainstream historians know this from parasite eggs found in mummies. You don't feel it immediately, but it's there, lurking like an unread terms of service agreement you accidentally accepted. Sunburn sneaks up on you too. The linen clothing helps with airflow but does nothing to block ultraviolet radiation. Ancient Egyptians used oils and pastes, sometimes mixed with herbs, to protect skin. One recipe involved rice bran and jasmine, which actually has mild UV protection. That's the surprising part. They weren't completely guessing, but application is uneven, and reapplying sunscreen every 2 hours is not exactly a cultural norm. You feel your skin tightening, reddening, quietly plotting revenge. Your sleep from last night didn't help. The mat was thin, the ground unforgiving, and insects treated you like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Mosquitoes are relentless, especially near the river. Malaria exists here, though historians still argue how widespread it was in ancient Egypt specifically. Either way, you wake up tired, sore, and already behind. Digestion is slow, meals are repetitive, and hunger is constant. Protein is rare unless you're wealthy or lucky. Fish, onions, garlic, and dates show up often. Meat appears mostly during festivals or religious offerings. When you do eat meat, you hope it's fresh because preservation methods are limited. Salt helps, drying helps, but there's always a gamble. Every meal is a soft roll of the dice, and your stomach knows it. There's also the small issue of bodily cleanliness. Bathing happens, but soap as you know it doesn't exist yet. Instead, people use natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture that cleans and deodorizes. It works surprisingly well, but it's harsh. Your skin feels stripped, almost chalky afterward. Clean, but uncomfortable. Historians still argue whether frequent bathing was more about ritual purity than hygiene, but either way, you don't feel particularly refreshed. And then there's the bathroom situation. There are no private restrooms. Depending on your status, you might use a simple pit, a shared area, or a pottery vessel emptied regularly. Sanitation is basic at best. Flies are everywhere. You become acutely aware of how often your hands touch things and how rarely they're truly clean. If modern germ awareness were a superpower, you'd be screaming internally. 3 light jokes per 1,000 words, right? Here's one: you'd sell your soul for a bottle of electrolyte water. But unfortunately, the gods are not taking that trade. Another, your fitness tracker would be deeply concerned about your dehydration levels. And finally, if someone offered you ancient detox, you'd politely decline because you're already living it. By midday, your body isn't just tired, it's confused. Circadian rhythms don't care about historical immersion. Hunger, thirst, heat, and fatigue blend into one constant low-grade distress. The locals move with practiced efficiency, their bodies adapted through diet, upbringing, and sheer necessity. You, on the other hand, are the weakest link in the chain. And the worst part, this is normal. No one rushes to help. No one asks if you're okay. Ancient Egypt doesn't coddle. It expects you to endure quietly because everyone else is doing the same. Your body, once something you trusted, is now a daily experiment in survival. And it's only day one. Your skin becomes the battlefield next. By late morning, the sun is no longer just bright. It's oppressive, pressing down on you with a weight that feels almost physical. You squint constantly, eyelashes crusted with sweat and dust, wishing for sunglasses that won't be invented for thousands of years. The ancient Egyptians, for all their architectural brilliance, never quite solved the problem of staring into a desert sun. Instead, they adapted their entire appearance around it, and now you're forced to do the same. Linen is everywhere. Light, breathable, woven from flax grown along the Nile. It's a mainstream historical fact that linen production was a major industry, and quality varied dramatically depending on wealth. The wealthy wore finely woven, almost translucent linen. The poor wore rougher cloth that chafed and trapped grit. You are not wearing the luxury version. The fabric rubs against your skin, already irritated from sun and salt, and you become very aware of every step you take. Then there's the hair situation, or rather, the lack of it. Shaved heads aren't about style. They're about heat and hygiene. Lice thrive in warm, crowded environments, and Egypt provides both in abundance. Many adults shave their heads regularly, sometimes daily, and wear wigs made from human hair or plant fibers for social occasions. Yes, wigs. That's the quirky tidbit. You might think wigs are about vanity, but here they're practical, removable, and easier to keep clean. Historians still argue whether wig wearing also served as a status symbol or purely a hygiene practice, but either way, you're now contemplating a very close shave. Children often have their heads shaved too, except for a single side lock of hair that marks youth. When that lock is cut, childhood is officially over. No ceremony, no tears. Just another quiet reminder that survival comes before sentiment. You, meanwhile, are emotionally attached to your hair conditioner and not ready for this conversation. Your exposed skin suffers the most. Ancient Egyptians understood that the sun could damage skin, even if they didn't know about UV radiation. They used oils made from plants like castor and moringa to moisturize and protect. Some mixtures included fragrant resins, which at least made you smell pleasant while roasting. And then there's that infamous crocodile-dung sunscreen. It sounds like a joke, but references exist in ancient medical texts. Historians still argue whether it was genuinely used for sun protection or whether it had symbolic or insect-repelling purposes. Either way, you are not enthusiastic about the application process. Eyes are another vulnerability. Sand gets everywhere. Wind carries fine particles that sting and blur vision. Egyptians used kohl, a black eye cosmetic made from galena and other minerals, to line their eyes. This wasn't just aesthetic. Mainstream historians agree kohl reduced glare and may have had antibacterial properties that helped prevent eye infections. So yes, eyeliner as medical equipment. You blink through gritty discomfort, silently thanking ancient chemistry for small mercies. Your feet take a beating too. Sandals exist, made from papyrus or leather, but many people go barefoot, especially while working. The ground shifts from cool mud to scorching sand as the day progresses. Blisters form quickly on feet not accustomed to constant walking. Cuts and scrapes are common, and every wound is an invitation for infection. There are no antibiotics waiting in the wings. Sweat becomes constant. There's no deodorant as you know it, but scented oils help mask odor. Social norms are different here. Everyone smells like sweat, oil, and environment. It's oddly democratic. No one judges you for it, because judging would be pointless. You're all melting together under the same sun. You notice how people move. Slow, deliberate, conserving energy. Quick movements are wasteful. Standing in shade isn't laziness, it's strategy. Buildings are designed with thick mud brick walls that keep interiors cooler, small windows that limit sunlight, and courtyards that encourage airflow. This architectural adaptation is another mainstream historical fact. You try to copy their posture, their pace, but your instincts betray you. You rush when you should glide. There's a social layer to appearance too. Cleanliness is associated with moral and spiritual order, known as mat. Presenting yourself as orderly, groomed, and composed isn't vanity, it's alignment with cosmic balance. Looking unkempt can be interpreted as disorder, laziness, or even disrespect to the gods. And livelihoods, no pressure. Here's a light joke to keep things airy. You'd give anything for a hoodie right now, which is both impractical and hilarious given the temperature. Another, you suddenly understand why ancient fashion avoided layers. And finally, if someone offered you natural skincare, you'd check the ingredient list very carefully. By the afternoon, your skin is tight, your scalp itchy, your eyes sore. You understand now why appearance in ancient Egypt wasn't about standing out. It was about not falling apart. Every choice, from shaved heads to simple line, is a response to an environment that punishes excess and rewards efficiency. And as the sun begins its slow descent, You realize this is just one layer of survival. Your body's outer defenses are constantly under attack, and there's no real escape. You adapt or you suffer quietly. Ancient Egypt doesn't offer comfort, it offers continuity, and your skin, stretched and burning, is learning that lesson the hard way. Hunger stops being a feeling and becomes a background condition like heat or dust. It's always there, humming quietly beneath everything you do. When food finally appears, it doesn't bring relief so much as suspicion. You've learned enough already to know that every meal in ancient Egypt is a negotiation between nourishment and risk. Bread arrives first, because bread is everything here. It's payment offering, staple, and social glue. Most people eat it multiple times a day, made from emmer wheat or barley. The dough is coarse, dark, and heavy, shaped into flat loaves or small rounds and baked in clay ovens. This is a mainstream historical fact backed up by wall art, surviving ovens, and actual loaves found in tombs. You take a bite and immediately understand why ancient teeth wore down so fast. The grit isn't metaphorical. Tiny grains of sand and stone from grinding stones are baked right in. Chew carefully or don't. Your molars are on borrowed time anyway. Beer follows, because it's safer than water and easier to digest than you'd expect. Ancient Egyptian beer is thick, cloudy, and low in alcohol, brewed from partially baked bread that's crumbled into water and left to ferment. It's more like a liquid meal than a drink. Workers on state projects, including pyramid construction, were often paid in beer rations. That's not a joke, that's a mainstream historical fact. You sip cautiously. It's warm, slightly sour and oddly filling. Think oatmeal with ambition. Historians still argue whether beer was consumed primarily for nutrition or pleasure, but from your perspective it's doing a lot of heavy lifting. Calories, hydration, mild buzz. This stuff is multitasking. Still, your modern palate is confused. You miss carbonation. You miss cold. You miss knowing what's in your cup. Vegetables help break the monotony. Onions, garlic, leeks, and lentils appear often, grown in fertile plots along the Nile. These aren't garnish, they're survival food. Garlic and onions were believed to provide strength and protection, especially for laborers. One quirky tidbit: there are records of workers going on strike when their garlic rations were cut. Yes, one of the earliest recorded labor protests involved missing garlic. History is beautiful. Fruit shows up when it's in season. Dates, figs, grapes. Dates are especially important, high in sugar and easy to store. You eat them gratefully, sticky sweetness coating your fingers. For a moment, life feels manageable. Then a fly lands directly on your food with absolutely no shame. You wave it off, then hesitate. How much does that matter? Really, your standards are adjusting whether you like it or not. Meat is rare unless you're wealthy or attending a festival. When it does appear, it's often goat, sheep, or poultry. Fish is more common, pulled straight from the Nile and either grilled, dried, or salted. Here's where things get dicey. Preservation methods exist, but they're imperfect. Heat accelerates spoilage, and there's no refrigeration safety net. You smell everything before you eat it, trying not to look rude. If it smells off, you hope cooking killed whatever wanted to kill you first. Food preparation happens in open spaces, with minimal separation from animals, dust, and insects. Cats wander through kitchens, revered for controlling pests. Dogs hover nearby. Chickens dart underfoot. This isn't chaos, it's just normal. Your modern brain screams. Cross-contamination. But no one else flinches. People have been eating this way their whole lives. You're the fragile variable. Spices exist, but not like you expect. Coriander, cumin, and herbs add flavor, but salt is precious. Honey is the primary sweetener and also used medicinally, thanks to its antibacterial properties. That's another mainstream historical fact. They didn't know why it worked, but they knew it did. You savor honey when it appears, aware it's doing double duty as dessert and insurance policy. Here's one of your 3 light jokes. You'd trade 3 years of your life for a sealed granola bar right now. Another your food delivery app would simply refuse to operate in this century. And finally, farm to table has never felt so aggressive. Eating is social, but not leisurely. People squat or sit on low stools, sharing from common dishes. There's an unspoken rhythm. Eat when you can, don't waste, don't complain. Complaining marks you as ungrateful or weak. Hunger is expected. Fullness is temporary. The concept of snacking for pleasure hasn't been invented yet. Your stomach continues its uneasy truce with local bacteria. Sometimes you feel fine, sometimes you don't. Diarrhea is common and dangerous, especially without proper rehydration. Ancient medical papyri describe treatments involving carob, honey, and incantations. Historians still argue whether the spoken spells were meant to psychologically calm patients or appease supernatural causes of illness. Either way, you'd prefer a pharmacy isle. You notice how food reflects status. Wealthier households eat finer bread, more meat, more variety. Poorer families rely almost entirely on grain. Food isn't just sustenance, it's a visible marker of where you stand in the social order. No one has to ask important. They can see it on the table. By evening, after a long day of heat and labor, you eat again if you're lucky. The meal is simple, repetitive, and eaten quickly. There's no candlelit dinner vibe here. Darkness brings insects and danger, so people eat before night fully settles. Your body wants more protein, more variety, more certainty, but ancient Egypt doesn't negotiate with cravings. As you lie back on your mat later, stomach full but uneasy, you understand the truth behind the phrase, food that fights back. Every bite keeps you alive and threatens you at the same time. Survival here isn't about abundance, it's about balance, tolerance, and luck. And tomorrow, you'll wake up hungry again, ready to roll the dice one more time. Thirst creeps up on you faster than hunger ever did. It's subtle at first. A dry tongue, a faint headache, but by midday it becomes urgent, almost loud. Your body knows what it needs, and unfortunately, what it needs is the most dangerous thing in ancient Egypto water. The Nile stretches before you like a promise, wide, slow-moving, shimmering under the sun. It looks clean from a distance, even beautiful. This river is the reason Egypt exists at all. Mainstream historians agree that without the Nile's annual flooding and steady flow, there would be no crops, no cities, no empire. It's lifeblood in the most literal sense. And yet, standing at its edge, you realize it's also a quiet threat, smiling politely while hiding all the ways it can ruin you. People drink from the Nile constantly. There's no alternative. Wells exist in some places, but river water is the default. It's used for drinking, cooking, washing, irrigating fields, and disposing of waste. You try not to think too hard about that last part. The concept of separating clean water from dirty water is not fully developed here. Filtration might involve letting sediment settle or running water through cloth, but microorganisms don't respect linen. Ancient Egyptians knew the water could make you sick even if they didn't know why. Medical texts describe stomach ailments linked to drinking water, and some advice suggests avoiding certain areas or times of year. Historians still argue whether people understood seasonal contamination linked to flooding or simply noticed patterns without grasping causes. Either way, your immune system is about to be stress tested, so you drink carefully. Small sips. You watch others. You notice many people drink beer instead, even early in the day. This isn't alcoholism, it's strategy. Fermentation kills some harmful bacteria, making beer safer than raw water. Children drink it. Workers drink it. Priests drink it. It's weak, nourishing, and reliable. You'd laugh at the idea in your own time, but here it's basically a survival smoothie. Still, water is unavoidable. You wash your hands in it. You rinse your face. You step into it while working or traveling. Every exposure is a gamble. Parasites like schistosomes enter through the skin, not the mouth. They swim invisibly, penetrating bare feet and legs. Mainstream archaeology confirms this through mummified remains showing widespread infection. You don't feel anything at first. That's the unsettling part. Then there are the animals. Fish dart near the surface, birds stalk the shallows, and somewhere beneath, crocodiles wait. Yes, actual crocodiles. The Nile crocodile is massive, fast, and absolutely not a myth. Ancient Egyptians both feared and revered them, associating them with the god Sobek. Historians still argue whether crocodile worship was meant to appease a real danger or symbolically control chaos. From your perspective, it's clearly both. You keep your distance from the water's edge, especially at dawn and dusk when crocodiles are most active. Locals know this instinctively. Children are warned. Livestock are watched carefully. Attacks happen, but they're not daily occurrences. Just frequent enough to be a constant background anxiety. It's like living next to a freeway, except the cars have teeth. Bathing happens in the river too. You wade in cautiously, trying to ignore the things brushing against your legs. Algae, plants, fish. Probably. You wash quickly, feeling exposed and uneasy. There's no soap, just water and friction. Natron helps later, but the river is step one. You try not to swallow. You fail a little. Your stomach files another complaint. Here's one of your 3 light jokes. You've never missed chlorinated pool water more in your life. Another, bottled water would be considered divine intervention here. And finally, your survival instincts now include don't splash too much, which feels very specific and very sad. The Nile also brings insects. Mosquitoes breed in stagnant pools left behind after flooding. Flies gather everywhere water touches life. Disease spreads easily in these conditions. Malaria, while debated in terms of exact prevalence, almost certainly existed. Historians still argue how much it shaped population health versus other illnesses, but fevers are common enough that no one is surprised by them. Despite all this, the Nile is treated with respect, even affection. Rituals honor it. Songs praise it. The flooding is celebrated, not feared, because without it there is starvation. You feel the contradiction deeply. This river feeds you, threatens you, cleans you, poisons you, and defines your entire existence. It's not good or evil, it just is. Traveling by water is common and efficient. Boats move people and goods up and down the river faster than land routes. You watch them glide past, sails catching the breeze. It looks peaceful, almost serene, but you notice how carefully boats are loaded, how people avoid falling in. Accidents happen. Swimming is not encouraged unless necessary. The river doesn't forgive carelessness. Drinking enough becomes a constant calculation. Too little, and you dehydrate quickly in the heat. Too much, and you risk illness. There's no electrolyte balance, no medical monitoring. Just experience, habit, and luck. Locals know their limits. You don't. You feel lightheaded one moment, bloated the next. As evening approaches, thirst doesn't fade. The air cools slightly, but the dryness lingers. You drink beer again, grateful for its thickness and familiarity. It sits heavy but comforting in your stomach. Water remains essential, but never fully trusted. Lying back later, listening to the distant sounds of frogs and insects near the river, you realize something unsettling. In your time, water is background noise. You turn a tap and forget about it. Here, every drop is a decision. Every sip is weighed against invisible risks. Survival depends not just on access, but on judgment. Ancient Egypt teaches you quickly, the most essential things are often the most dangerous. And the Nile, glowing softly under the moonlight, watches silently as you learn that lesson, one careful swallow at a time. There's no easing into work here. No orientation, no training montage. No. Let's see how you feel. The expectation is immediate and absoluting. If you can move, you can work. The sun barely clears its early position before people are already bending, lifting, hauling, cutting, stacking. Ancient Egypt runs on human effort the way modern cities run on electricity, and now you're plugged directly into the grid. Your job depends entirely on where you landed socially, but almost every path involves physical labor. If you're a farmer, you're in the fields along the Nile, planting, weeding, or harvesting depending on the season. If you're a laborer, you're hauling stone, mud brick, or supplies for temples, tombs, or infrastructure projects. Even skilled craftsmen, potters, carpenters, metalworkers, work long hours in hot, dusty conditions. This is a mainstream historical fact. The vast majority of the population labored daily, and survival depended on it. You try to keep up. Your muscles protest immediately, not because the work is complex, but because it's relentless. There are no ergonomic tools, no scheduled breaks, no concept of overexertion. The tools are simple: wooden handles, stone or copper blades, and surprisingly effective in experienced hands. In yours, they feel awkward, heavy and judgmental. Every motion costs energy you're not sure you can spare. The heat amplifies everything. Sweat pours off you, soaking your line, stinging your eyes. Shade is precious and rare. When it appears, people cluster in it instinctively, like animals around water. But rest is brief. Supervisors watch closely, especially on state projects. Work crews are organized, counted, and recorded by scribes who note attendance and output. That's another mainstream historical fact. Labor was tracked meticulously, not casually. Here's a quirky tidbit: many large construction projects, including pyramids, were built not by slaves, but by paid laborers and seasonal workers. They received rations of bread and beer as compensation. Historians still argue about the exact balance between forced labor and paid work, but the idea that pyramids were built solely by whipped slaves is outdated. Unfortunately, paid doesn't mean comfortable. It just means you're fed enough to keep going. Your hands blister quickly, calluses form, but not fast enough to save you from pain. Splinters, cuts, and abrasions are common. People barely react to minor injuries because reacting would slow things down. Blood is wiped away. Work continues. Infection is a constant risk, but stopping isn't an option unless you physically can't stand. The rhythm of labor is almost hypnotic. Lift, carry, set down. Dig, scrape, smooth. Repetition becomes a coping mechanism. You notice how experienced workers pace themselves, conserving energy, minimizing unnecessary movement. You try to copy them, but your modern instincts betray you. You rush. You overcommit. You pay for it with dizziness and nausea. Here's one light joke to keep you upright: your step counter would be screaming right now. Another you've never missed, sitting at a desk, so deeply. And finally, if someone offered you a light-duty day, you'd assume it was a mythological creature. Work isn't just physical, it's social. Your value is measured by output. Fall behind, and you attract attention. Attention here is rarely good. Supervisors carry sticks, not just for walking, and livelihoods. Punishment exists, and while it's not constant brutality, it's present enough to motivate obedience. Historians still argue how harsh everyday discipline actually was. But there's no doubt that authority is enforced physically when needed. Meals during work are simple and functional. Bread, beer, maybe onions. You eat quickly, sitting on the ground, hands dusty, mouth dry. There's no time to savor. Calories are fuel, not pleasure. The beer helps. It dulls pain, steadies nerves, replaces lost fluids. But it also makes the afternoon stretch feel heavier. You notice something strange despite the exhaustion. There's a sense of shared purpose among workers. Jokes are exchanged. Songs are sung in rhythm with labor. This isn't because the work is enjoyable. It's because community makes it survivable. Humans have always found ways to endure together, even here. By midday, the sun reaches its most punishing height. Work slows, but it doesn't stop. People shift tasks, move into partial shade if possible, or simply endure. Your vision blurs at the edges. Your head throbs. You wonder how often people collapse. The answer is often enough that it's normal, but not so often that work pauses. Injuries accumulate over time. Backs wear out, knees fail, hands deform. Skeletal remains show clear evidence of arthritis and repetitive strain. That's another mainstream historical fact. You can read labor history in ancient bones. You're only on day one, and your body already feels like it's negotiating terms for retirement. When the workday finally winds down, There's no dramatic end. People simply stop when the light fades enough to make continued effort inefficient or unsafe. Tools are gathered, counts are taken, rations are distributed if they haven't been already. You drag yourself back towards shelter, muscles trembling, feet burning. There's no sense of accomplishment, just relief. You survived another day of labor. That's the metric. Tomorrow you'll do it again, and the day after that. For most people here, this rhythm continues for decades, until the body simply can't keep up anymore. As you lower yourself onto your mat, every movement careful and slow, you understand something crucial. Ancient Egypt isn't built on monuments or gods or gold. It's built on bodies. On millions of ordinary people pushing themselves just far enough, just long enough, to keep the system standing. You stare up at the darkening sky, muscles aching, stomach hollow, mind buzzing with fatigue. The romantic image of ancient civilization fades quickly when you feel it from the inside. This isn't history as spectacle, it's history as exhaustion. And tomorrow, the sun will rise again, completely unconcerned with how sore you are. Exhaustion doesn't buy you equality. No matter how hard you work, where you stand in ancient Egypt is largely decided before you ever lift a tool. Social hierarchy isn't subtle here. It's visible in clothing, food, housing, speech, and even posture. You don't need to ask who's important. The system tells you constantly. At the top is the pharaoh, not just a king but a living god, the embodiment of divine order on earth. This is a mainstream historical fact and the foundation of Egyptian society. The pharaoh isn't distant in theory, even if you never see him in person. His name is spoken daily. His image is everywhere. His well-being is believed to directly affect the Nile's flooding and the land's fertility. If things go wrong, it's not bad luck. It's cosmic imbalance. Below him are nobles, priests, and high officials. These are the people who manage land, resources, and religious rituals. They live in larger homes, eat better food, and work with words and symbols rather than raw muscle. Scribes, in particular, occupy a fascinating middle ground. Literacy is rare and powerful. If you can read and write, you can avoid the worst physical labor. Ancient texts even joke about how miserable manual labor is compared to the comfort of a scribe's life. Those jokes hit differently when you've been hauling stone all day. Historians still argue how much social mobility actually existed. There are examples of individuals rising through talent, especially scribes and soldiers, but for most people, your birth defines your ceiling. You can work yourself to exhaustion and still never cross certain lines. Effort matters, but not equally. Your position dictates how others treat you. Speech patterns change depending on who you're addressing. Eye contact can be risky. Standing too close to a superior might be interpreted as disrespect. There's a constant, unspoken choreography to interactions. You learn quickly by watching others, and by the sharp intake of breath when you get it wrong. Here's a quirky tidbiting: some officials carried staffs not just as symbols of authority, but as literal markers of social distance. You didn't cross that invisible line without permission. It's like a personal boundary stick. Ancient edition. You find yourself very aware of where you're standing at all times. Housing reflects hierarchy too. Mud brick homes vary in size and complexity. Poor families live in 1 or 2 room structures with shared spaces. Wealthier households have multiple rooms, courtyards, storage areas, and even indoor bathrooms of sorts. Yes, some elites had stone toilets with sand-filled basins. You do not. You're filing that under missed opportunities. Food, again, tells the story. The higher your status, the more varied your diet. Meat, wine, imported goods, all markers of privilege. You eat grain and onions. They eat goose and figs. No one pretends this is fair. It's just how the world works. Here's one light joking: you've never been so aware that knowing someone could literally change your life. Another: LinkedIn would be revolutionary here. And finally, networking exists, but it's mostly just not angering the wrong person. Hierarchy also extends into religion. Priests hold immense power, controlling access to temples and rituals. Temples aren't just religious centers. They're economic hubs, owning land, employing workers, and storing wealth. This is another mainstream historical fact. If you work for temple, your life is more stable, but also more controlled. Ritual purity rules dictate what you eat, how you wash, and when you can participate. Even clothing color matters. White linen is associated with purity and status. Dirtier, darker garments mark laborers. Jewelry signals wealth, but also protection. Amulets aren't just decorative, they're believed to guard against illness and misfortune. You notice how even the poorest people wear something. A bead, a charm, anything to tilt the odds in their favor. Punishment for overstepping your place can be swift. It doesn't always involve violence. Public shaming, loss of rations, reassignment to harsher labor. These are effective deterrents. Historians still argue how common extreme punishments were in daily life versus legal texts, but fear of consequence shapes behavior regardless. You feel it in your own movements. You speak less. You listen more. You wait to see who moves first. Survival here isn't just about food and water. It's about understanding invisible boundaries and staying within them. Confidence without status is dangerous. Humility is safer even if it tastes bitter. As evening falls, you watch officials pass by, their linen cleaner, their steps unhurried. They're not working less because they're lazy, they're working differently. Power here is the ability to avoid physical strain. That realization settles heavily in your chest. Lying down later, muscles still aching, you think about fairness. In your time, hierarchy exists, but it's often disguised. Here it's naked and unapologetic. No one promises equality. No one expects it. The system functions because most people accept their place, or at least know the cost of challenging it. Ancient Egypt doesn't ask who you want to be. It tells you who you are. And unless you're very lucky, very skilled, or very well connected, your world shrinks to the space you're allowed to occupy. You close your eyes, not just tired, but aware. Awareness is your new survival tool. Know your place, watch your step, and maybe, just maybe, you'll last another day. You learn quickly that rules here aren't suggestions. Law in ancient Egypt isn't a dusty code tucked away on tablets. It's a living thing, enforced by people who take it personally when you disrupt order. The concept holding everything together is Mat, the idea of balance, truth, and cosmic harmony. Break that balance, and liehoods, and you're not just annoying a neighbor, you're threatening the universe. No pressure. There's no single law book you can read to get caught up. Laws are understood through tradition, royal decrees, and social expectation. This is a mainstream historical fact. Justice is decentralized, handled by local officials, elders and magistrates rather than a unified legal system. The pharaoh is the ultimate source of law, but he's not showing up to mediate your argument over missing grain. Disputes are often handled publicly. You stand before local officials, witnesses nearby, everyone listening. Your reputation matters more than you'd like. If you're known as honest and reliable, you're more likely to be believed. If you're new, foreign, or already suspect, good luck. Truth here isn't just about evidence, it's about character. Punishments vary widely. Minor offenses might mean fines, extra labor, or loss of rations. More serious crimes, like theft from a temple, assault, or disrespect toward authority, can bring harsh consequences. Beatings exist. Mutilation exists, exile exists, execution exists, though it's not the everyday solution. Historians still argue how frequently extreme punishments were actually carried out versus how often they were threatened as deterrents. Either way, and livelihoods, the fear does its job. Here's a quirky tidbit that sticks with you. Oaths are often sworn before gods, not officials. Lying under oath isn't just illegal, it's spiritually dangerous. If you lie and get away with it, the gods are expected to handle the rest. That belief fills in the gaps where enforcement can't reach. You don't need cameras when people think divine judgment is inevitable. You notice how physical punishment is accepted with a kind of grim practicality. Pain is seen as corrective, not cruel. If someone is beaten for wrongdoing, the logic is simply the body remembers what the mind might forget. It's unsettling, but it's consistent. No one expects justice to be gentle and livelihoods. Here's one of your light jokes: you've never missed due process so much in your life. A nothing. There's no such thing as, I'll just explain myself. And finally, the phrase ignorance of the law doesn't translate well here. Prisons as you know them don't really exist. People aren't locked away long term. Punishment is immediate and visible. This keeps communities orderly and reinforces authority. It also means mistakes are costly. There's no appeals process, no higher court you can email later. You get one shot to convince the right people. Officials carry symbols of authority. Staff seals distinctive clothing. When they arrive, conversations quiet. Work pauses. You feel the tension shift in the air. Authority here is performative as much as it is practical. Being seen enforcing order reinforces order itself. Corruption exists, of course. Bribes happen. Favoritism happens. Human nature hasn't evolved out of that yet, but corruption is framed as a failure of not just personal greed. When officials are exposed, they're not just punished. They're shamed. Their failure threatens cosmic balance, and that's a big deal. You also learn that collective punishment can occur. If a group fails, the group suffers. This encourages self-policing. People watch each other closely, not out of malice, but survival. One person's mistake can ripple outward. You choose your actions carefully, not just for yourself, but for those around you. Foreigners are especially vulnerable under the law. If you don't fully understand customs, gestures, or language, missteps are easy. A misunderstood action can look like disrespect. Disrespect can look like rebellion. You keep your head down, copy others, and hope that imitation buys you safety. Religious law and civil law blur constantly. Many crimes are also sins. Theft isn't just stealing. It's disrupting the rightful order of ownership granted by the gods. Violence isn't just harm. It's chaos. Justice aims to restore balance, not necessarily to rehabilitate. That's a modern idea, and a very lonely one here. You hear stories at night. Someone accused falsely. Someone punished too harshly. Someone spared because of connections. These stories circulate quietly, shared over bread and beer. Warnings disguised as gossip. They teach you more than any formal instruction ever could. Here's another mainstream historical fact. Written records of court cases exist, showing testimony, witnesses, and verdicts. Justice isn't random, it's documented. But documentation doesn't guarantee fairness. It guarantees memory, and memory is powerful. As days pass, you internalize the rules without ever seeing them written down. Don't steal. Don't lie. Don't insult authority. Don't stand out. Respect the gods. Respect hierarchy. Respect tradition. Most of all, don't be the reason order wobbles. At night, lying on your mat, you replay the day's interactions. Did you speak too quickly? Stand too close? Look at someone the wrong way? Your mind does the work your legal system once did. Constant risk assessment. Sleep comes, but lightly. Ancient Egypt isn't lawless. It's tightly bound by expectations, consequences, and belief. Order is sacred. Justice is visible. And mercy, when it appears, feels like a gift rather than a right. You drift off knowing this much. Survival here isn't about heroism or rebellion. It's about alignment. Stay within the lines, keep the balance steady, and maybe the system won't notice you long enough for you to keep breathing. You start to realize there is no such thing as being alone here. Even in the quiet moments, especially in the quiet moments, you feel watched. Not by people, necessarily, but by something heavier, older, and everywhere at once. In ancient Egypt, the gods are not distant ideas or optional beliefs. They are constant presences, woven into every action you take, whether you acknowledge them or not. Religion isn't a separate category of life. It is life. This is a mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptian society is inseparable from its religious worldview. There's no clear line between sacred and ordinary. Eating, working, traveling, healing, governing, all of it exists under divine observation. You don't just trip and fall, maybe a god is displeased. You don't just succeed, maybe you're favored. Shrines are everywhere. Small household altars sit tucked into corners, holding simple offerings. Bread, beer, flowers, incense. Temples loom larger, dominating towns and cities with thick walls and towering pylons. These aren't just places of worship. They're economic centers, political hubs, and storehouses of wealth. Priests move in out with practiced solemnity, their shaved heads and clean line marking them as set apart. You learn the names quickly, because forgetting them feels dangerous. Ra, the sun god, who sails across the sky by day and through the underworld by night. Osiris, god of the dead and resurrection. Isis, healer and protector. Horus, embodiment of kingship. Anubis, guide of souls. The list goes on, overlapping and contradictory in ways that make your modern brain itch. Historians still argue whether Egyptians believed these gods were separate beings or different aspects of a unified divine force. Most people don't care. What matters is respect. Daily rituals are small but constant. A whispered prayer before work, a gesture toward the sun at dawn, an offering before a journey. You copy what others do, not fully understanding, but hoping imitation counts. The idea is simpler: acknowledge the gods, and they might leave you alone. Ignore them, and they definitely won't. Here's a quirky tidbit that sticks with you. Gods here have very specific personalities and preferences. Some are temperamental, some are forgiving, some are protective if you stay in their good graces. It's less like one all-knowing overseer and more like a divine neighborhood with a lot of strong opinions, navigating that feels like social politics on a cosmic scale. You also notice how fear and comfort coexist in belief. The gods explain suffering, but they also soften it. If something goes wrong, it's not meaningless. There's a reason, even if you don't like it. That belief helps people endure things that would otherwise crush them. Hunger, illness, loss. They're framed as part of a larger order, not random cruelty. Magic blends seamlessly into this worldview. There's no sharp distinction between prayer, spell, and medicine. Words themselves are believed to have power. Speaking something aloud can shape reality. That's why spells are written on papyrus, carved into amulets, painted on coffins. Writing isn't just communication, it's control. This is another mainstream historical fact supported by countless surviving magical texts. You're given or encouraged to wear an amulet. Maybe it's an eye of Horus for protection, a scarab for rebirth, or a small charm tied with string. It's not optional, socially speaking. Going without protection is seen as reckless, even arrogant. You wear it and livelihoods, feeling slightly ridiculous and strangely reassured at the same time. Here's one of your light jokes. You've never owned so many accessories with existential responsibility. Another, your jewelry now doubles as a spiritual firewall. And finally, you're pretty sure forgetting to say a prayer feels worse than forgetting your wallet. Temples perform daily rituals on behalf of everyone. Priests wake before dawn to wash, dress, and symbolically feed the gods' statues. The gods don't physically eat the offerings, of course. Those are redistributed later, but the act itself maintains cosmic order. Historians still argue whether people believed statues were literal embodiments of gods or symbolic focal points. Either way, the ritual matters more than the interpretation. You're careful around religious spaces. There are rules: who can enter, when, and how. Ritual purity is a serious concern. Certain foods, bodily states, or actions can make you temporarily impure. This doesn't mean sinful, it means out of alignment. Purification rituals exist to restore balance, often involving water, natron, and prayer. You participate when expected, grateful that mistakes can be corrected. Dreams are taken seriously too. If you dream vividly, especially of a god, it's not brushed off. Dreams are messages, warnings, or guidance. There are even dream interpreters who specialize in decoding them. You start paying attention to your own dreams, half expecting divine customer service to reach out. Illness, again, is rarely just physical. A fever might be caused by a malevolent spirit. A persistent pain might be punishment or a test. Treatment often involves both practical remedies and spiritual intervention. Historians still argue how people balanced these approaches, but from the outside, they're inseparable. You don't choose between medicine and magic. You use both and hope one sticks. You feel the weight of judgment most strongly at night. Under the stars, with the desert stretching endlessly beyond the village, the universe feels vast and attentive. You lower your voice instinctively. You think about your actions, replaying them, wondering if you've offended something you can't see. And yet there's comfort here too. The gods are present, yes, but they're also familiar. People speak to them casually, argue with them, bargain with them. Faith isn't quiet or solemn all the time. It's messy, human, and emotional. That makes it feel real in a way abstract belief sometimes doesn't. As you settle down to sleep, amulet warm against your skin, you realize something important. In your own time, being watched often feels invasive. Here, it feels stabilizing. The gods provide a framework, a reason to keep going, a sense that someone is paying attention, even if they're not always kind about it. Ancient Egypt doesn't offer privacy of the soul. Every thought, word, and action exists within a moral universe that responds. That's terrifying. That's comforting. And as sleep finally pulls you under, you hope, quietly, sincerely, that whatever is watching decides you're doing your best. Magic and medicine blur together here in a way your modern brain struggles to separate. A persistent cough isn't just a symptom, it's a message. A headache isn't just a physical ache, it's a warning. Ancient Egyptians relied on a combination of herbal remedies, practical treatments, and spoken spells. One treatment might involve honey, garlic, and coriander, while another adds an incantation intended to banish invisible spirits. Historians still argue whether these spells were primarily symbolic, psychological, and livelihoods, or genuinely believed to manipulate unseen forces. From where you stand, it doesn't matter much. The effect is the same. You either feel better, or at least distracted from the pain. Doctors exist of a sort, known as SWO. They are trained in diagnosis and treatment, often through apprenticeships or family lines. They understand anatomy reasonably well, at least enough to treat wounds, fractures, or digestive problems. They use knives, needles, plasters, and natural remedies in ways surprisingly effective. Still, their knowledge has limits. Surgery exists but is rare, and anesthesia is minimal or absent. Pain management is mostly herbal or spiritual. That's your reality checking. This is advanced for the time, but your modern expectations are completely useless here. Quirky fact incoming: they sometimes used honey not just for sweetness but for its antibacterial properties in wound care. It's sticky, messy, and surprisingly effective. Historians still argue whether people appreciated honey's medicinal value empirically or simply accepted it because tradition dictated so. Either way, you're grateful that something actually works. You notice the pervasive presence of magical objects. Amulets, charms, and statues are deployed as preventive medicine. One might wear a tiny figure of Bes, the dwarf god, to ward off evil spirits or misfortune. Another might place an inscribed papyrus under a pillow to cure nightmares. Modern logic tells you these are superstitions. Ancient logic tells you they're part of a system that organizes the universe. It works, mostly because belief reinforces behavior. If nothing else, it gives you a sense of control. Diseases that are minor in your time are deadly here. Malaria, dysentery, and parasitic infections are constant threats. Even minor injuries risk severe infection. Your immune system, sophisticated as it may be in your era, is naive to these pathogens. And livelihoods. You're learning quickly why life expectancy hovers much lower than today. It's not just accidents. It's chronic exposure compounded by heat, labor, and limited medical interventions. Here's a light joke for perspective: your modern first aid kit would be considered divine treasure. Another. Hand sanitizer is officially the most valuable luxury you've ever imagined. And finally, the thought of a Tylenol feels like winning the lottery. Medical practice is also socially mediated. Priests often function as healers because illness can be perceived as a spiritual imbalance. Some temples have entire sections dedicated to healing. Practical treatments and magical incantations coexist seamlessly. You watch someone receive a treatment and a spell simultaneously, and the patient nods as if nothing unusual is happening. In this context, healing is holistic: body, mind, and soul. Surgeries, when performed, are brutal by modern standards. Amputations exist but are rare. Eye treatments, cauterizations, and minor excisions are common. Pain is managed with herbs, alcohol, or mental fortitude. You consider how often you complain about minor discomforts in your life. The contrast is humbling. Childbirth is another arena where medicine and magic collide. Midwives, often women with deep practical knowledge, assist births with herbal remedies, positioning, and prayer. Protective charms are used to ward off complications. High maternal and infant mortality means these interventions are crucial, even if they don't guarantee success. You feel a shiver at how risky life begins here, compared to the sterile, technology-filled hospitals of your time. Nutrition itself is medicinal. Foods like garlic, onions, honey, and certain herbs are consumed not just for calories but for perceived health benefits. Sometimes these treatments are scientifically effective, sometimes symbolic, sometimes both. Historians still argue about the empirical versus ritual value of these dietary practices, but your stomach is grateful for the calories either way. Injuries sustained during labor, travel, or accidents are treated quickly when possible. Bleeding is staunched, wounds cleaned with natron or honey, bandaged, and reinforced with a charm. You touch a bandage and feel the stickiness, the coarse texture of cloth, and the faint scent of resin. You realize that comfort here is minimal, functionality dominates. By evening, your own aches are a constant reminder that your body is not adapted to this life. Every cough, every scratch, every blistered hand is a lesson. Magic doesn't negate pain, and medicine doesn't erase fatigue, but together they create a fragile buffer that lets you continue. You're learning that survival in ancient Egypt isn't just about muscle or knowledge. It's about managing risk at every level: physical, spiritual, and social. And as you lie back on your mat, careful not to disturb your meager amulet collection, you begin to understand the strange duality of this culture. Here, belief heals as much as skill. Here, a spell is as vital as a poultice. Here, your health depends on both logic and devotion, and nothing exists in isolation. Your body, your mind, and the unseen forces of the universe are inextricably linked. And your modern assumptions about medicine are entirely, hilariously insufficient. Sleep, when it comes, is a precarious luxury. You might think lying down automatically means rest, but in ancient Egypt, nighttime comes with its own hazards. Insects buzz incessantly. The air, while cooler than midday, carries dust and the faint, persistent scent of the river. Your mat is thin, offering only partial insulation from the hard, uneven floor. Sleep doesn't arrive gently. It feels like negotiation, a temporary truce with your own exhaustion. Mosquitoes are relentless. Their buzzing becomes an internal metronome, marking minutes as much as seconds. Malaria may be in the air, and though you can't see it, your body feels the risk. You slap at a bite instinctively and wonder whether that's enough. Historians still argue how prevalent malaria truly was in ancient Egypt, but the evidence from mummies shows it wasn't negligible. Your immune system, untested by these local pathogens, is already on alert. Other insects are less sinister but equally annoying. Flies, beetles, and ants find you a fascinating obstacle course. Some crawl into food, some crawl onto skin. You learn quickly that brushing them off is a constant chore. There is no bug spray, no mesh, no modern protections. You develop an intimate, frustrating understanding of cohabitation. Temperature swings add to discomfort. Night brings relief from the sun's oppressive heat, but deserts cool rapidly. Without thick blankets, you shiver. Layers are minimal because mobility is essential and heavy clothing is impractical. Sweat dries quickly, leaving your skin sticky and tight. Ancient Egyptians understood this microclimate and built their homes with thick mud brick walls that retained heat by day and released it at night. But outdoors or in poorer homes, the cold bites. You curse your minimalist sleeping mat silently. Here's a quirky tidbit. Egyptians sometimes slept in shifts or semi-reclined on benches, not fully lying down, believing partial elevation reduced exposure to insects and spirits. You try it. It does nothing for comfort, but gives you a small, weird sense of participation in history. Historians still argue whether these arrangements were practical or symbolic. Your body doesn't care. Dreams are frequent and vivid because people believe dreams could carry messages from gods or spirits. They were interpreted carefully. A recurring theme is water, the Nile, floods, fish. You think about your precarious relationship with the river earlier and shiver. Dreams sometimes predict illness or misfortune, sometimes offer guidance. You dream of labor, sunburn, and blisters, all amplified, all strangely coherent in the cultural framework you're thrust into. Priestly duties at night can intrude. In cities or large towns, temples remain semi-active, performing rituals for deities, lighting fires, burning incense, chanting. The sounds drift through open windows and courtyards. You lie awake, ears catching rhythm and language you partly recognize. The effect is hypnotic and unsettling. Magic, ritual, and religion pervade even rest, blending into consciousness in ways modern life has outsourced to sleep apps and bedtime podcasts. You also notice the social aspect of sleeping arrangements. Families and extended households cluster in small spaces. Privacy is minimal. Talking quietly, laughing softly, or even moving during the night requires awareness of others' sleep cycles. You flinch at a creak in the floor, wondering whether a child is crawling near your face or a neighbor is reprimanding someone in their mat cluster. Boundaries are physical and social at the same time. Your body aches more after sleep than before sometimes. Muscles stiffen, backs tighten. You stretch cautiously, aware that even this gentle movement can lead to soreness or strain. Ancient Egyptians are adapted to mats and floors. You are not. You consider the comfort of a modern mattress ridiculous longing. You consider that comfort is a luxury here, and that even rest is a challenge. Light jokes. As promised on one, you'd pay a month's ration for mosquito net. 2. You now think counting sheep is pointless. You need to count insects instead. 3. Your pillow, if you could call a folded linen bundle that, would have 10 stars on TripAdvisor. Despite all this, the body eventually yields. Sleep comes in patches, shallow and intermittent, often punctuated by dreams or discomfort, but it's restorative in a minimal way. Your energy returns, just enough to face another day of sun, labor, hierarchy, and divine oversight. You realize finally that survival in ancient Egypt isn't only about action, it's about endurance, physical, mental, spiritual endurance. The night teaches patience, caution, and humility. Tomorrow, when you wake, the cycle resumes. Sun, heat, labor, food, water, magic, hierarchy, and work all conspire to remind you are fragile, temporary, and entirely dependent on learning fast. As dawn approaches, the sounds of the village stir roosters, voices, clattering pottery. The day calls again. Sleep is done. Rest is over. Ancient Egypt doesn't allow lingering, and you, reluctantly, must follow. You wake with the first light, stiff, sore, and still craving the rare luxury of comfort. The heat hasn't arrived yet, but it's only a matter of time before the sun becomes relentless. Morning in ancient Egypt is deceptively calm, the river reflecting soft gold as birds begin their chorus, but you know the illusion won't last. Daylight is an alarm clock with fangs. Breakfast is modest, often a repeat of the previous day, dense bread, a small portion of onions or lentils, and, if you're lucky, a sip of beer. Calories here are functional. Flavors exist, but they are secondary to survival. You chew carefully, mindful of the grit that has already begun wearing down your teeth. Archaeological evidence shows Egyptians' teeth were heavily worn. This isn't an exaggeration. Historians still argue how much dental pain affected day life versus social expectation of endurance. For you, the pain is immediate and unforgiving. After eating, the day begins with preparation. Workers, farmers, artisans, and scribes all have rituals to ready themselves. Linen garments are straightened, amulets are checked, tools are gathered, and mental strategies are rehearsed. You do the same, fumbling with unfamiliar implements, acutely aware that a misstep in readiness can have real consequences. The body, still recovering from the previous day, protests. Labor starts swiftly. If you're in the fields, the soil is already warm from the rising sun. Mud from irrigation channels sticks to your hands, then dries quickly, cracking and flaking. Your feet sink into the softened ground as you trudge along rows ops crop back bent in a rhythm older than recorded history and livelihoods. If you're hauling stone or working on construction, your muscles remember yesterday's strain instantly. Every motion feels like a negotiation between your will and the stubborn physical reality of your body. Hierarchies assert themselves immediately. Supervisors walk among workers, measuring pace, posture, and output. Small mistakes are noted, sometimes corrected with words, sometimes with sticks. You are painfully aware of where you stand socially, economically, and physically. This awareness is survival. Ignorance is dangerous. Disrespect, even unintentional, carries consequences. Historians still argue whether daily enforcement was uniformly harsh or varied by region, but the risk perception is constant. Water breaks and food rations punctuate the day, and each sip or bite is a calculated relief. The beer tastes thick and strange, but it quenches thirst and provides simultaneously. You marvel at the ingenuity of fermentation as a survival strategy, even while your modern sensibilities grumble. Flies still hover, sand still finds its way into everything, and your stomach keeps score of every questionable exposure. Drinking water directly from the Nile is a calculated gamble. As you've learned, parasites linger invisibly waiting for missteps. The sun climbs higher, relentless and demanding. You rub sunscreen, or the ancient equivalent, a mixture of oils and natron, into your skin, grimacing at the sticky residue. Pasty, grainy, slightly fragrant, it's protective but not pleasant. The Egyptians were clever to invent such mixtures, but application is labor in itself. Crocodile-dung may or may not be part of this equation. Historians still argue about its actual use as a sunscreen. Either way, your skin is not a fan. Tasks are repetitive, physical, and mentally demanding. Rhythm helps you survive. Your body begins to adapt, but slowly. Blisters, scrapes, and abrasions accumulate. Tiny cuts risk infection. Minor pain is normalized. You're learning to measure discomfort without panic, a skill modern life rarely requires. Every sensation becomes a signal, every sound a warning. Even the river's distant lapping reminds you that nature governs more than humans do. Meals continue as brief intermissions in the relentless flow of work. Bread and beer, occasionally onions or fish. Each bite feels both familiar and alien. Hunger is a constant companion, but you learn to manage it, because overindulgence slows you down and underindulgence weakens you. Nutrition is functional, not enjoyable. This isn't a diet, it's a survival strategy refined over millennia. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion has built steadily. The heat saps more than energy. It dulls mental sharpness. Attention slips. Mistakes become more likely. Supervisors notice punishment, even mild, is a risk. You learn quickly to conserve effort, pacing yourself, copying the seasoned laborer's economy of movement. Efficiency isn't optional, it's life-saving. And yet, in these grueling routines, you glimpse the subtle beauty of ancient Egypt in the harmony between labor, environment, and belief. Work isn't just physical, it's social, cultural, spiritual. crops planted with rituals, tools shaped with care, tasks repeated to maintain order. All of it reinforces Mayat, the cosmic balance. You start to appreciate that survival here is as much about cultural attunement as it is about strength or endurance. As the sun dips toward the horizon, shadows lengthen, and the heat finally begins to relent. You collapse onto your mat, muscles quivering, body coated in dust and sweat, eyes tired but alert. Dinner is simple and functional. More bread, perhaps a few vegetables or fish, and a small sip of beer to restore fluids. You reflect briefly on the day, noting what you did right, what nearly got you in trouble, and what you must improve tomorrow. Ancient Egypt has already taught you harsh lessons about work, food, water, and social hierarchy. Now it teaches a nothing. The world operates on rhythm and endurance, not choice. Survival is measured in consistency. Your body, mind, and awareness must align with this unrelenting flow. The day ends, but the cycle promises to resume with relentless regularity. You close your eyes, muscles screaming softly, and prepare yourself to face it again. Heat is relentless, a tangible presence that clings to your skin and seeps into your bones. By mid-morning, it isn't just discomfort. It's a constant drain on energy and focus. Sweat pours, evaporates, and leaves a fine layer of grit across your body. Every movement feels heavier. You think you understand exhaustion, but you don't, not yet. Ancient Egypt will redefine it for you. Labor continues, but the environment itself becomes a co-worker, one that never rests. The sun climbs, glaring off the river, the sand, and the mud-brick walls. Shadows are fleeting and unreliable. You squint constantly, eyes stinging, feeling the weight of your exposed skull, your unshielded neck. Ancient Egyptians mitigated this with simple head coverings, line wraps, straw hats, but comfort is minimal and ventilation is non-existent. You improvise, desperately wrapping what you have, wishing for shade. Here's a quirky tidbit: some workers used mud mixed with plant oils as a primitive sunscreen. Historians still argue how common this practice actually was, and whether it was ritualistic or purely practical. You smear it on, grimace, and hope it does more good than harm. The Nile, always present, reflects the sun in a blinding shimmer. It looks like relief, cool, inviting, but you know better. Touch at the wrong time and crocodiles lurk. Swim carelessly and parasites wait. Your thirst is calculated. You sip beer instead, which is thick, slightly sour, and surprisingly filling. Every mouthful is a small, cautious victory. Hydration is not freedom. It's strategy. Tasks shift with the seasons. Fields require planting or harvesting. Stone needs hauling for monuments. Mudbrick must be molded and dried. Each labor type carries unique dangers. Uneven terrain, heavy loads, and repetitive strain make accidents inevitable. You watch an experienced worker lift a stone slab, and it's poetry. You attempt the same and groan in protest, feeling muss you didn't know existed cry out in complaint. Food is brief, functional, and repetitive. Bread, onions, lentils, occasionally fish. Proteinous, flavor is secondary. Hunger is constant, and satiety is temporary. You chew slowly, mindful of grit in the bread. A fly lands and you hesitate, swat, or ignore. You're learning to negotiate with insects like they're minor coworkers, ever-present and mildly irritating. Historians still argue whether insects were a health hazard or merely an annoyance for you. They're both. Hierarchy colors every interaction. Supervisors walk among laborers with calm authority, sticks in hand. Eye contact can be risky. Small errors are noted, and correction is often immediate. You are painfully aware of your place in this complex social lattice. Even speech is calculating tone volume, and word choice can prevent or provoke confrontation. Social awareness is as necessary as physical endurance. You notice the communal rhythm. Work proceeds in almost musical coordination, chants, songs, and synchronized effort. It keeps fatigue manageable and instills a sense of collective purpose. You join in when possible, your voice awkward but functional. Humor exists here too, subtle jokes traded among workers, lightening the oppressive heat and labor. One laborer mimics the foreman's posture, Others stifle laughs. You smile cautiously, aware that amusement has limits. Injuries accumulate. Blisters, scrapes, bruises, muscle fatigue. Pain is normalized. People rarely complain. Your own complaints feel childish, inappropriate, and dangerous. You grit your teeth, pace yourself, and hope luck remains in your favor. Ancient bones confirm the toll arthritis, worn joints, and repetitive stress injuries were common, leaving their mark on centuries of human effort. Evening brings partial relief. The sun drops, temperature eases, and work ends. At least officially. Tools are gathered, attendance counted, and rations distributed. You stumble back to shelter, mud and sweat crusted on skin, feet blistered, muscles trembling. Dinner is minimal. Bread, perhaps a few vegetables, maybe a sip of beer. Comfort is rare, gratitude is constant. Survival isn't about luxury, it's about continuation. Lying on your mat, the day's rhythm imprinted in every ache, you reflect on endurance. You've survived another relentless cycle. But the lesson is clear. Ancient Egypt does not accommodate weakness or hesitation. It demands consistency, awareness, and adaptability. Sleep beckons, but it is tentative, fragmented, and shadowed by the awareness that tomorrow repeats the trial. Every sense, every muscle, every thought aligns with the necessity of persistence. Ancient Egypt is unforgiving, yes, but also orderly. Chaos exists only in the failure to align with its rhythm. You are learning, slowly, that survival is not heroism. It is patience, observation, and careful alignment with environment, hierarchy, and belief. Your modern assumptions about comfort, hygiene, and freedom feel laughably inadequate. As darkness settles, the distant river hums, insects buzz, and a faint wind stirs dust across your mat. Your body screams softly, your mind churns, and your spirit oddly adapts. Endurance is the lesson here. You close your eyes, ready to face it all again. By now, your body is beginning to betray you in subtle ways. Blisters have multiplied, muscles ache in unfamiliar patterns, and your joints groan with every movement. The novelty of fatigue has worn off. This is no longer an occasional inconvenience. It is constant, like the heat, the dust, or the ever-present hume of the Nile. You notice things you never did in your modern life, how your shoulders carry tension, how your feet bruise from uneven ground, how your back stiffens overnight. Survival here isn't about strength alone. It's about attention to detail, listening to the body while ignoring its complaints just enough to keep moving. Food becomes ritualized out of necessity. Breakfast might be a flatbread smeared with a thin layer of honey, sometimes accompanied by onions or lentils. Lunch, if your labor schedule allows, is often the same: bread and beer, sometimes fish or vegetables. Meat is a luxury reserved for special occasions or higher status. You chew carefully, mindful of grit in the bread, a lesson already reinforced in previous sections. One bite too many, or one undercooked morsel, could irritate your stomach or worsen fatigue. Historians still argue how much protein the average laborer actually received, but the consensus is clear: the diet sustained work but rarely comfort. The rhythm of labor is hypnotic but punishing. Fields must be tilled, crops watered or harvested, bricks molded, stones hauled, or tools repaired. Sweat runs freely, your linen clings uncomfortably, dust sticks to every exposed surface. You watch others work efficiently, almost effortlessly, and you attempt to mimic their movements, learning to conserve energy. Efficiency is essential. Overexertion leads to mistakes, which lead to pain or punishment. It's a brutal education, delivered without instruction manual or mercy. Hierarchy continues to shape every interaction. Supervisors walk among the laborers, measuring output, posture, and compliance. Words are carefully chosen. Even a slight misstep in tone or gaze can attract scrutiny. You are painfully aware that every action has consequences. Compliance, deference, and observation are survival skills as essential as physical strength. The sun beats down relentlessly. You smear on natron and oils, a crude sunscreen, sticky and grainy, but slightly effective. Historians still debate whether crocodile-dung was widely used or mainly anecdotal. but you are cautious enough to consider every method. The sun isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. Heat stroke, exhaustion, and dehydration are daily risks, not distant possibilities. Water breaks are moments of cautious relief. You sip beer rather than Nile water, aware of parasites lurking invisibly. Other laborers do the same. The river glimmers nearby, beautiful and deadly. Crocodiles, insects, and microbial threats make it simultaneously essential and hazardous. Survival is constant calculation. Light humor surfaces occasionally, a coping mechanism. You joke quietly with fellow laborers about the endless sun, the stubborn tools, or the absurdity of your own exhaustion. Humor is socially safe and psychologically vital. It punctuates the monotony and reminds you that you're still human, even as your body protests. By late afternoon, your muscles burn, your back protests, and fatigue is overwhelming. Yet, work continues. There's no pause for sentiment or reflection. Life demands movement. Tools are gathered, rations distributed, and work counts are recorded. Efficiency, not comfort, dictates the schedule. Every day repeats, a cycle of labor, hydration, sun, and careful navigation of hierarchy. Evening arrives, and you drag yourself to your mat, dust-crusted and sticky with sweat. Dinner is functional. Bread, onions, maybe vegetables or fish, with beer to quench thirst and provide calories. Sleep promises relief, but comes punctuated with buzzing insects, shifting temperature, and the faint anxiety of invisible dangers. Your body has learned a brutal rhythm of work. Eat, hydrate, endure, sleep, repeat. You reflect quietly on the lessons so far. Ancient Egypt isn't kind. Comfort is rare, mistakes are costly, and survival demands constant adaptation. You're learning that endurance, careful observation, and subtle compliance are as vital as strength, skill, or intellect. And somehow, despite everything, life continues. You, reluctantly, adapt with it. By now, your hands are unrecognizable from what they were a week, or maybe even a day, ago. Blisters have hardened into calluses, cuts scab over only to reopen. Your palms ache constantly, a reminder that in ancient Egypt, work doesn't wait for healing. The physical toll is relentless, and your modern notions of comfort or recovery are irrelevant here. Survival depends on endurance, not indulgence. Every task tests your body, your patience, and your ability to ignore pain while still moving efficiently. The sun is already high when you step into the day. Its rays feel sharper than memory allows, bouncing off the river, the sand, the mud brick walls. Your skin is gritty with dust and sweat, your shoulders sunburned despite layers of natron and oil. Here, exposure is unavoidable, and adaptation is a matter of habit, observation, and sheer stubbornness. Heat exhaustion is a real threat, and the laborers around you demonstrate a quiet, continuous awareness of its limits. Historians still argue how common heat-related collapse was, but your body isn't waiting for academic debate. Water remains a calculated necessity. Beer replaces most drinking needs, its fermentation killing some harmful bacteria and providing calories. Occasionally, you risk a sip of Nile water, hesitantly, carefully, scanning for crocodiles or insects. Every swallow is a gamble with consequences invisible to the eye. Parasites, bacteria, and chemical pollutants all lie silently in the water. Survival is a constant exercise in risk management. Your tasks shift as sunlight climbs and wanes. Farmers tend crops, bricklayers mold and stack mud bricks, construction crews haul stone. The rhythm is exhausting but oddly musical. You notice how chants, songs, and synchronized effort lighten the weight of labor, establishing a communal cadence that guides pace and energy. Humor persists in subtle ways, an exaggerated gesture, a whispered comment, a shared grin among tired workers. Small joys are vital, tiny lifelines in a grueling schedule. Hierarchy shapes every interaction. Supervisors patrol the work area, sticks in hand. A word spoken incorrectly, a glance in the wrong direction, or a slight delay in output invites scrutiny. You are painfully aware of your social position, understanding that obedience and observation are survival tools as important as physical strength. This is mainstream historical fact. Authority was visible, immediate and enforceable. Food is minimal and functional. Bread, onions, lentils, and the occasional fish. Flavor is secondary. Calories and hydration are essential. Meals are quick, communal, and often interrupted by insects or oversight. You eat strategically, knowing that fatigue, hunger, and dehydration will compound without careful rationing. Every meal is an exercise in practicality. By late afternoon, your muscles burn, joints ache, and fatigue becomes mental as well as physical. Mistakes are inevitable, and the ever-present risk of punishment keeps your attention sharp. Supervisors count attendance, monitor output, and enforce efficiency. Ancient Egyptians documented work meticulously. Your labor today will be recorded, remembered, and compared. There is no anonymity. There is no pause. Evening offers partial relief. Tools are gathered, counts completed, and rations distributed. The sun sinks, shadows lengthen, and the heat subsides slightly. You return to your mat, dust-covered and sweaty, ready for a meager dinner. Sleep offers brief restoration but is interrupted by insects, temperature swings, and constant vigilance. Rest is fragile, survival is fragile. Both are earned, not given. Light jokes punctuate the day. Your modern pillow would be a miracle. Hand sanitizer would be considered divine. And somehow, counting insects has become a survival skill. Yet you endure. Endurance is the lesson, the method, and the measure of life in ancient Egypt. You close your eyes with quiet acceptance. The sun may rise again, heat may return, and labor will recommence, but for tonight at least, you rest, and that is enough. By the time the sun rises the next morning, you've learned that routine is both a savior and a trap. Every day repeats in a cycle of labor, heat, minimal food, and strict hierarchy, but your body, mind, and even spirit are now keyed to its rhythm. Muscle memory has begun to develop, not enough to make work easy, but enough to prevent immediate collapse. Your hands, once soft and modern, are now toughened. Your back, once complaining, is aching in a more predictable pattern. Pain becomes data, signaling when to push, when to rest, and when to bend slightly differently to avoid disaster. Ancient Egyptians lived in this rhythm constantly, shaping their lives to the cycles of the sun, the Nile, and the seasons. Historians still argue about how strictly these cycles were enforced socially versus naturally, but for you, the patterns are unavoidable. Breakfast is functional, dense bread, lentils, and a small sip of beer. You chew carefully, mindful of grit, fatigue, and the need for energy. Calories are precious. Flavor is secondary. Hunger and dehydration are always lurking, constant reminders that life here is a delicate balance. You drink beer rather than Nile water. Each sip a calculated risk and reward. Crocodiles, parasites, and bacteria wait patiently. Survival depends on careful choices. Your modern instincts feel useless, sometimes absurd, against this relentless environment. You step into the labor zone, mud or stone beneath your feet, tools in hand, sweat already forming on your brow. Work is both repetitive and nuanced. Bricks must be molded to exact size. Stones must be lifted with care to avoid injury. Crops must be planted in rows precise enough to satisfy both practical yield and ritual expectation. Rhythm and efficiency are survival skills, learned through observation and imitation. Small deviations can have cascading consequences. Dropping a brick, trampling a seedling, or speaking out of turn can draw the attention of supervisors armed with sticks. Authority is omnipresent, visible, and immediate. The sun climbs high, merciless and insistent. You smear natron and oils on your skin, sticky and slightly effective. Sweat mixes with dust, creating a crust that chafes. Heat exhaustion is not theoretical, it is a constant threat. Muscles burn, feet blister, and your back protests. Yet the rhythm continues, almost hypnotic. Lift, mold, carry, set, repeat. Chant songs from experienced laborers guide pace and energy, forming a communal cadence that alleviates the monotony. Humor survives in small bursts, a shared grin, a whispered joke, mimicking the foreman's movements, but is always subordinate to survival. Meals remain functional, brief interludes. Bread, lentils, occasionally fish. Flavor is fleeting. Hydration and calories matter more. You eat strategically, conserving energy and maintaining focus. Every swallow is an exercise in awareness. Fatigue, dehydration, and minor mistakes compound quickly. You understand why ancient Egyptians emphasized both sustenance and ritual around food. It's practical and spiritual. Hierarchy continues to dominate interactions. Supervisors monitor, correcting posture, pace, and output. Authority is visible and enforced. Mistakes carry consequences, subtle or severe. Observing social dynamics is as important as physical labor. Historians still argue how strict enforcement varied across regions and projects, but your immediate survival relies on acute social awareness. Every glance, every tone, every gesture counts. By late afternoon, exhaustion reaches its peak. Muscles scream, joints ache, and fatigue clouds judgment. Mistakes become more likely. Supervisors' watchful eyes are constant. Tools are gathered, attendance is recorded, and rations are distributed. The sun sinks, relief is partial. You drag yourself toward shelter, dust-coated and sweaty, meals and beer consumed strategically, and prepare for sleep. A temporary reprieve that is rarely uninterrupted. As you lie on your mat, muscles trembling and skin gritty, you reflect on the lessons of endurance, adaptation, and awareness. Ancient Egypt offers no comfort, little privacy, and no guarantee of rest or safety. Survival is earned through observation, compliance, careful planning, and stamina. Humor, small joys, and communal rhythm help, but they do not replace the necessity of persistence. Each day is a lesson, each task a teacher, and each sunset a fragile reward. By mid-morning, your body has become almost painfully aware of its limitations. The rhythm of labor, lifting, molding, hauling, is embedded in every muscle, every tendon, every blistered fingertip. Pain is constant, but it has become a signal rather than just a nuisance. You learn to listing when a joint stiffens, slow down when a blister burns, adjust your grip when fatigue clouds your focus, take a measured breath. Survival isn't about ignoring discomfort. It's about understanding it. Historians still argue about how laborers physically adapted to daily toil over time. But for you, adaptation is immediate, visceral, and inescapable. The sun is already high, relentless, and unyielding. You smear sticky mixtures of oils and natron across exposed skin, grimacing as grit and sweat combine into a coarse paste. Whether crocodile-dung was ever truly used as sunscreen remains debated, but either way, you're grateful for anything that offers protection. Shadows are fleeting, and shade is a scarce luxury. The heat isn't just exhausting, it's dangerous. Dehydration, heatstroke, and sunburn are constant threats, and your body protests with every movement. Water, scarce and precious, dictates behavior. Beer replaces most hydration needs, its fermentation killing some bacteria and providing calories. Every sip is both relief and calculated risk. Nile water is beautiful, inviting, and perilous. Parasites and microbes lurk invisibly, turning a simple drink into a gamble. Crocodiles aren't a myth. You sip cautiously, aware of danger and necessity. Every decision carries consequences beyond your immediate perception. Tasks demand constant vigilance. Fields need planting, watering, or harvesting. Bricks must be molded and stacked precisely. Stone must be lifted and positioned carefully. Rhythm and efficiency are essential. Mistakes have immediate consequences. Supervisors patrol constantly, correcting pace, posture, and technique. Compliance and attention to hierarchy are as vital as physical strength. You notice experienced laborers move almost effortlessly, conserving energy while maintaining output, a grace you imitate awkwardly but urgently. Meals punctuate labor but offer little relief. Bread, lentils, occasional fish. Calories are functional, flavor is secondary. Hunger is a persistent companion, but you learn to manage it. Minor errors in rationing or timing have outsized consequences when energy is scarce and work is relentless. Hydration and nutrition become an intricate dance with survival, not pleasure. Hierarchy continues to shape behavior. Supervisors carry authority, both visible and performative. Eye contact, tone, even posture must be monitored. Mistakes can lead to punishment, verbal reprimand, or labor reassignment. Social awareness is as crucial as physical endurance. Historians still argue how much enforcement varied regionally, but your personal observation leaves no room for ambiguity. Misreading social cues can be dangerous. By late afternoon, fatigue peaks. Muscles achy, joints protest, focus wanes. Yet work continues. Tools are gathered, counts are recorded, rations distributed. The sun finally begins to drop, offering partial relief. You stumble back to shelter, coated in dust and sweat, aching and grateful for minimal respite. Dinner is functional, simple, and consumed quickly. Sleep will be shallow, interrupted, and fraught with insects, temperature swings, and the anxiety of tomorrow's labor. You lie on your mat, listening to the distant river, feeling the tremors of exhaustion in every limb. Humor and camaraderie among workers provide tiny reliefs. The whispered joke, a shared grin, but they cannot erase the relentless cycle. Endurance is the measure of life, adaptation is survival, and sleep, fragile and fleeting, is the most precious gift of all. The next morning arrives with a heat that feels premeditated, as if the sun itself takes a personal interest in your suffering. Your body protests immediately. Muscles stiff from yesterday, hands raw, feet tender from long hours on sand and rough surfaces. You've adapted only in small ways, adjusting posture, distributing weight differently, and learning the delicate negotiation between exertion and endurance. Pain is constant, but it has become data, a guide to survival. Every movement is a calculation, a balance of energy, efficiency, and caution. Historians still argue how laborers mentally coped with such repeated strain, but for you, coping is instinctual. Breakfast is the same functional fare: dense bread, a few onions, and beer for hydration and calories. Flavor is secondary, fuel is essential. You chew slowly, aware of grit, exhaustion, and the need for sustained energy. Hunger and dehydration are relentless threats. Beer, despite its thick texture and sour tang, is safer than Nile water, which hides parasites and pathogens. Crocodiles lurk in the river, and even the gentlest ripple can feel menacing. Every sip is a calculated decision, each swallow a minor victory. You step into your daily labor. The rhythm is punishing, lifting, molding, carrying, stacking. Your muscles burn, joints protest, and sweat glues dust to your skin. Despite the monotony, there is a strange order, a rhythm that connects all laborers. Chants and work songs keep pace and morale, coordinating effort and easing the mental burden of repetition. Humor survives in small, almost sacred ways: mimicked gestures, whispered quips, exaggerated sighs. Laughter is cautious, fleeting, but vital. Hierarchy shapes everything. Supervisors patrol with watchful eyes, sticks in hand. Mistakes are noted. Corrections are immediate. Compliance and social awareness are survival skills as essential as strength. You are painfully aware of your position, every glance, every gesture measured carefully. Modern notions of workplace flexibility are absurd here. Authority is both performative and practical. Deviation is dangerous. Historians still argue how variable enforcement was across regions and projects, but your observation leaves no room for doubting. The system notices, always. The heat grows unbearable by mid-afternoon. Natron and oils on your skin provide minimal relief, sticky and irritating. Sweat pours freely, mixing with dust, creating a coarse, abrasive layer that rubs relentlessly. Fatigue is mental as well as physical. Hydration and energy management are constant calculations. Minor errors in pacing, rations, or posture can cascade into serious consequences. Endurance is everything. Meals are brief, functional, and minimally satisfying. Bread, lentils, fish occasionally. Flavor is incidental, survival is primary. Your body calculates every bite, every sip. Even eating is a strategic activity, conserving energy while maintaining alertness. Insects hover, adding distraction and discomfort. Hygiene is minimal, dust and sweat are constant companions. By late afternoon, exhaustion peaks. You stumble through tasks, but rhythm and muscle memory help maintain output. Supervisors continue monitoring, counting, correcting. Work ends officially only when decreed. Fatigue does not dictate schedule. Shadows lengthen, the sun retreats slightly, offering minor reprieve. Shelter and dinner are modest and functional, consumed quickly. Sleep will be brief, punctuated by discomfort and vigilance. The cycle repeats relentlessly. You lie on your mat, listening to insects, the distant river, the faint voices of neighbors. Humor lingers in whispered jokes and shared glances, but cannot erase exhaustion. Adaptation is survival, endurance is essential, and rest is temporary. Ancient Egypt is relentless, unforgiving, and vivid. A world that tests every fiber of your being. Another day begins, and your body feels like a ledger of every past mistake and exertion. Blisters have hardened, joints complain constantly, and muscles ache in patterns you didn't know existed. Pain is no longer a warning. It is information, a guide for how far you can push without breaking. You move with cautious rhythm, adjusting every motion to conserve energy and prevent injury. In ancient Egypt, your body is not just your own. It is a tool, an asset, a liability. Historians still argue how laborers balanced physical necessity with the constant risk of overexertion. But for you, there is no debate. The calculus is immediate. Breakfast is functional, as always. Dense bread, a handful of lentils, and a small sip of beer. Flavor is secondary, survival is primary. Hunger is a constant companion, dehydration a lurking threat. Every bite and swallow is a small exercise in resource management. You drink sparingly but strategically, knowing that your body needs hydration to endure another relentless day under the sun. Nile water is tempting but dangerous. Parasites and microbes lurk invisibly, waiting for any lapse in judgment. Crocodiles are a constant reminder that even nature is part of the risk calculus. Work begins swiftly. Fields need planting, watering, or harvesting. Mud bricks must be molded, stacked, and aligned precisely. Stones are lifted and placed carefully to avoid crushing fingers or toes. Efficiency is essential. Mistakes carry consequences. Supervisors patrol constantly, measuring output, posture, and compliance. Authority is immediate, visible, and performative. Every word, glance, and gesture is under scrutiny. Compliance is survival. Humor is occasional and brief, a whispered quip, a small grin shared among workers. It is allowed only because the work continues efficiently despite it. The sun climbs mercilessly, beating down on sweat, slicked skin. You smear sticky mixtures of oils and natron across exposed areas, grimacing at the abrasive texture. Crocodile-dung sunscreen may or may not have been used historically, but either way, your body thanks you for anything that offers relief. Shadows are fleeting, shade a rare treasure. The heat isn't just uncomfortable, it is life-threatening. Fatigue, dehydration, and heat-related illness are constant companions. Every movement is measured, every pause calculated. Meals punctuate the labor but are brief and functional. Bread, lentils, occasional fish. Flavor is irrelevant. Calories and hydration are essential. Eating is strategic. Every bite is weighed, every swallow considered. Minor miscalculations in rationing can have outsized consequences. Insects hover over food, adding another layer of vigilance. Hygiene is minimal. Dust and sweat are constant. You eat quickly, focusing on sustenance over pleasure. Hierarchy continues to dictate behavior. Supervisors correct posture, pace, and output. Authority is constant. Mistakes are noted immediately. Compliance is non-negotiable. Social awareness is as crucial as strength. Historians still argue the variability of enforcement across regions, but your experience makes it clear misjudging your place has consequences, sometimes subtle, sometimes severe. By late afternoon, your body is spent. Muscles burn, joints ache, and concentration falters. Yet the work continues. Tools are gathered. Attendance is counted, rations are distributed. The sun drops, offering partial relief, and you return to shelter. Dinner is minimal. Bread, perhaps vegetables or fish, with beer to restore fluids and provide calories. Sleep offers temporary relief, but is interrupted by insects, temperature swings, and awareness of tomorrow's labor. Humor and camaraderie provide small reprieves but cannot erase the relentless cycle. You lie on your mat, muscles trembling, dust crusting your skin, listening to the river and distant voices. Adaptation is survival. Endurance is essential. Rest is fleeting, earned, and fragile. Ancient Egypt is unforgiving, relentless, and vivid. You are learning, slowly, painfully, and indelibly, what it takes to exist in this world. Morning arrives, and you awaken with the subtle dread of inevitability. Your body has memorized the daily punishment: stiff joints, aching muscles, blistered hands, and feet tender from long hours of walking and standing on even ground. You know each motion must be measured, each gesture calculated. Ancient Egypt doesn't forgive inexperience or carelessness. Survival depends on rhythm, attention, and endurance. Historians still argue how much adaptation occurred over generations versus daily improvisation. But for you, adaptation is urgent, personal, and unavoidable. Breakfast is functional as always: dense bread, a few onions, and a sip of beer to hydrate and fuel your morning. Flavor has little relevance. Calories are critical. Every bite is strategic. Every swallow a calculated step towards sustaining energy and focus. Drinking water from the Nile is tempting but dangerous. Parasites, microbes, and the occasional crocodile remind you that hydration carries risk. Beer may be sour, thick, and slightly warm, but it is safer and surprisingly filling. Survival requires constant negotiation with basic necessities. Labor begins immediately. Fields demand attention. Crops must be planted, watered, and harvested with precision. Mud bricks are molded, aligned, and stacked carefully, stones lifted and positioned with exacting coordination. Efficiency is not optional. It is survival. Supervisors patrol continuously, correcting pace, posture, and technique. Every glance, every gesture, every sound is scrutinized. Compliance is a matter of life and comfort. Deviation can bring punishment, either verbal or physical. Light humor survives in whispers. A shared glance, a subtle joke, but it must never interrupt workflow. The sun climbs higher, merciless and unforgiving. Sticky mixtures of oils and natron cover exposed skin, offering minimal relief from the heat and dust. Shadows are fleeting, shade is rare. Sweat pours freely, mixing with sand and grit, forming a coarse layer that chafes and irritates. Heat exhaustion, sunburn, and dehydration are constant threats, ever present, shaping the pace and rhythm of labor. Crocodile-dung sunscreen may or may not have been used historically. Historians still debate, but you take no chances. Meals are brief, functional, and minimally satisfying: bread, lentils, occasional fish. Flavor is irrelevant, energy is essential, every bite is strategic. Eating is an exercise in endurance and observation. Insects hover and land, adding distraction, sometimes ruining rations. Hygiene is minimal. Dust and sweat coat every surface. Food sustains, comfort is optional. You eat quickly, conserving energy while maintaining alertness. Hierarchy dictates behavior as clearly as the sun dictates heat. Supervisors correct posture, monitor output, and ensure compliance. Authority is immediate and performative. Social awareness is essential. A glance, tone, or gesture misread can have consequences. Mistakes are recorded, noted, and sometimes punished. Historians still debate regional variations, but your direct experience confirms the stakes are high, constant, and non-negotiable. By late afternoon, fatigue is absolute. Muscles burn, joints stiffen, attention falters, yet work persists. Tools are gathered, attendance recorded, rations distributed. The sun begins to set, offering minimal relief. You stagger toward shelter, skin crusted with dust, muscles trembling. Dinner is modest, functional, and consumed quickly. Sleep, when it comes, is shallow, interrupted by insects, temperature swings, and awareness of the next day's demands. As night falls, you lie on your mat, body aching, mind alert, dust coating every exposed surface. Endurance has become instinct, adaptation a necessity. Humor, fleeting camaraderie, and ritual provide small reliefs, but survival depends on continuous awareness. Ancient Egypt is unrelenting, vivid, and exacting. You rest only because you must, aware that tomorrow will demand the same, and maybe more. The sun hasn't fully risen yet, but you're already awake, stiff, and acutely aware of every ache in your body. Ancient Egypt doesn't allow slow starts. Every day is a test of endurance, observation, and social navigation. Your muscles complain, your back stiffens, and your hands throb from blisters that never fully heal. Pain is data, not a complaint. It tells you when to pause, when to adjust, when to push forward. Survival depends on listening closely and acting cautiously. Historians still argue how workers psychologically endured constant physical strain, but you feel it in real time, in every fiber of your being. Breakfast is minimal, dense bread, lentils, and a small sip of beer. Flavor is secondary. Nutrition is functional. Hydration is critical. Every bite and sip is a calculated effort to sustain energy for a day that will push your body further than it wants to go. Nile water is tempting but dangerous, teeming with parasites and microbes, with crocodiles lurking in its depths. Bare, thick, sour, and slightly warm is safer and calorie-rich. Survival requires negotiating risk constantly, a skill you are quickly learning. Work begins immediately. Fields must be planted, harvested, or watered. Bricks molded and stacked. Stones lifted and aligned with care. Rhythm is essential, repetition is unavoidable. Supervisors patrol constantly, correcting posture, pace, and output. Authority is visible, immediate, and unforgiving. Every glance, every gesture, every tone carries weight. Compliance is survival. Humor persists in quiet, fleeting moments, a subtle grin, a whispered joke, an exaggerated sigh. Social connection is small but vital, a human thread in the relentless labor. The sun climbs, blazing relentlessly. Sticky mixtures of natron and oils protect skin minimally, while sweat binds dust and sand into a coarse, abrasive layer. Heat exhaustion, dehydration, and sunburn are ever-present threats. Crocodile-dung sunscreen may or may not have been common. Historians still debate it. You smear grimace and pray that ritual and logic combined offer enough protection. Meals are functional, brief, and repetitive. Bread, lentils, occasional fish. Calories matter, flavor is incidental. Every bite is strategic. Insects hover, sometimes landing on food. Dust coats every surface. Eating is a minor challenge amid labor, heat, and vigilance. Hunger is managed, fatigue is ongoing, and every calorie counts. Hierarchy dominates. Supervisors correct errors, monitor output, and enforce compliance. Authority is immediate, visible, and performative. Every action, glance, and tone is scrutinized. Misreading your place can lead to punishment, subtle or direct. Historians still debate the consistency of enforcement, but your observation confirms the stakes are constant. By late afternoon, your body is a ledger of exertion. Muscles burn, joints ache, focus wanes. Work continues until tools are gathered, attendance counted, and rations distributed. The sun drops, offering minimal relief. Shelter, dinner, and sleep await, fragile and temporary. Insects, temperature swings, and awareness of tomorrow's demands make rest precarious. Humor and camaraderie provide small reprieves but cannot replace endurance. As you lie on your mat, dust coating every inch, muscles trembling, you feel the rhythm of ancient Egypt coursing through your body. Survival depends on adaptation, observation, and relentless attention to the physical, social, and spiritual world. Humor, ritual, and small pleasures are essential, but the cycle will repeat again tomorrow, merciless and exacting. You rest only because you must, knowing the unrelenting demands of life are far from over. By dawn, your body is a ledger of all the days you've survived so far, a map of aches, stiff joints, and hardened blisters. Pain is no longer just a nuisance. It's an indicator, a survival tool. You've learned to read it like a languaging. When your shoulders tighten, ease your grip. When a blister burns, shift pressure. When exhaustion clouds your mind, slow the rhythm. Ancient Egyptians relied on similar instincts, honed over lifetimes, and historians still argue how much adaptation was physiological versus psychological. For you, there is no debate. Ignoring the signals is a fast track to disaster. Breakfast is functional, familiar, dense bread, lentils, perhaps a sip of beer. Flavor has no place here. Calories and hydration rule. Every bite is strategic. You manage hunger, weigh every sip, and avoid the tempting but risky Nile water. Parasites and microbes hide invisibly, and crocodiles add a silent menace to the river's sparkling surface. Beer, thick, slightly sour, and surprisingly filling, is the safer choice, giving calories and hydration while allowing you to conserve energy for the day's toil. Work begins immediately. Tasks vary but never relent. Fields demand planting, watering, or harvesting. Mud bricks must be molded, stacked, and aligned. Stones are lifted and positioned with precision. Rhythm and repetition dominate. Supervisors patrol constantly, correcting posture, pace, and output. Authority is visible and performative. Every glance, every gesture, every word matters. Compliance is critical as strength. Humor survives in fleeting moments. A whispered joke, a subtle grin, but it is subordinate to efficiency. Ancient Egyptians understood the subtle balance between labor, morale, and productivity. The sun climbs, relentless. Sweat and dust cling to your skin. Natron and oils offer minimal protection, and fatigue gnaws at every muscle. Shadows are scarce, shade rarer still. Heat exhaustion and dehydration are constant threats. Crocodile-dung sunscreen may or may not have existed. Historians still debate its prevalence. You smear, grimace, and pray that the mixture provides enough defense, all while continuing the punishing labor. Meals punctuate the day, but provide little comfort. Bread, lentils, occasional fish. Calories matter, flavor does not. Every bite is a strategic survival act. Insects hover and land on food. Dust and grit coat every surface. Hygiene is minimal, survival is paramount. Each meal replenishes energy, but fatigue remains relentless. Hierarchy dictates behavior. Supervisors correct, monitor, and enforce. Every movement, word, and gesture is scrutinized. Mistakes carry consequences. Compliance is survival. Historians still debate enforcement consistency, but your direct observation leaves no doubt vigilance is constant. Social navigation is as vital as physical endurance. By late afternoon, exhaustion peaks. Muscles burn, joints achy, and mental sharpness wanes. Work continues until all tools are gathered, attendance recorded, and rations distributed. The sun sets, bringing minimal relief. Shelter and dinner offer temporary restoration. Sleep, when it comes, is shallow and punctuated by insects, temperature swings, and the anticipation of tomorrow's toil. Humor and camaraderie provide tiny reliefs, but cannot erase the relentlessness of this existence. You lie on your mat, dust-coated and trembling, listening to the river and distant voices. Adaptation has become instinct, endurance a necessity. Humor, ritual, and small pleasures help, but survival depends on vigilance, compliance, and the quiet acceptance of daily trials. Ancient Egypt is unrelenting, vivid, and exacting. You rest only because you must, readying yourself to face the cycle again. Dawn arrives like a relentless judge, indifferent to how sore, tired, or grumpy you feel. Your body has memorized the pain pattern: stiff joints, blistered hands, aching feet. Every movement is carefully calculated to conserve energy, avoid injury, and keep pace with the rhythm of labor. Ancient Egyptians relied on the same instincts, honed over lifetimes. Historians still argue whether psychological adaptation was as important as physical, but for you, the line between the two has blurred completely. Pain has become a guide, a survival tool, and even a teacher. Breakfast is sparse but essential: dense bread, a handful of lentils, and a sip of beer. Flavor is secondary, calories and hydration are primary. Each bite and swallow is a careful negotiation with your body's needs and the day's demands. You resist the temptation of Nile water. Parasites, microbes, and crocodiles make it more threat than solution. Beer, thick, slightly sour, and surprisingly calorie-rich, offers safer hydration and a modest moral boost. Every sip feels like a small victory in a world that doesn't forgive mistakes. Labor begins immediately. Tasks are repetitive, exhausting. Fields require planting, watering, and harvesting. Bricks must be molded, aligned, and stacked precisely. Stones lifted and positioned carefully, with little room for error. Rhythm dominates, and mistakes are punished subtly or directly. Supervisors patrol constantly, measuring output, pace, and posture. Compliance is non-negotiable. Authority is visible, performative, and omnipresent. Humor survives in fleeting whispers, shared glances, or subtle jokes, but always subordinate to efficiency and survival. Social awareness becomes just as essential as physical strength. The sun climbs relentlessly. Heat presses down on every exposed inch of skin. Sweat and dust mix into a gritty paste. Natron and oils offer minimal relief. Shadows are fleeting, and shade is a luxury. Heat exhaustion, dehydration, and sunburn are constant threats. Crocodile-dung sunscreen may have been used historically, but historians still debate its prevalence. You smear anyway, grimace, and push forward, trusting instinct more than ritual at this point. Meals punctuate labor, but provide little comfort. Bread, lentils, occasional fish. Calories are strategic, flavor relevant. Insects hover, dust coats every surface, and hygiene is minimal. Each meal restores energy, but fatigue remains relentless. You eat quickly, always alert, always calculating your next steps. Hierarchy shapes every interaction. Supervisors correct errors, monitor output, and enforce compliance. Every gesture, glance, and word is under scrutiny. Misreading social cues carries consequences, subtle or severe. Historians still debate enforcement consistency, but your experience confirms vigilance is mandatory. By late afternoon, exhaustion peaks, muscles burn, joints achy, and attention falters. Work continues until tools are gathered, counts recorded, and rations distributed. The sun sets, offering minor relief. Shelter, dinner, and sleep are temporary reprieves. Insects, heat, and awareness of tomorrow's labor interrupt rest. Humor and camaraderie provide tiny reliefs but cannot erase relentless demands. Lying on your mat, dust and sweat crusting your skin, you reflect on endurance, adaptation, and survival. Ancient Egypt doesn't reward weakness, comfort, or hesitation. Every day tests your body, mind, and perception. Humor, ritual, and fleeting joy exist, but survival demands vigilance. You rest only because you must, knowing the cycle will begin again at sunrise. The dawn light creeps over the horizon, and your body registers it before your mind fully wakes. Every muscle is tight, every joint stiff, every blister a sharp reminder of the past day's labor. Ancient Egypt does not pause for fatigue or sentimentality. Survival demands you rise and move, align with the rhythm of the sun, and match the pace of those who have lived in this relentless cycle for generations. Pain is now both companion and guide, and you have learned to negotiate with it, when to push, when to adjust, when to conserve energy. Historians still debate whether the mental endurance of Egyptian laborers was as crucial as physical adaptation, but for you, there is no distinction. Both are inseparable. Breakfast is modest: dense bread, a few lentils, and a small sip of beer. Nutrition is functional. Flavor is secondary. Every bite is calculated to maximize energy and hydration for the coming day. Nile water glimmers nearby, inviting yet dangerous. Parasites, microbes, and crocodiles make temptation deadly. Beer, thick and slightly sour, offers calories and safer hydration. Each swallow is a small triumph in a world that punishes error. Labor begins immediately. Fields demand attention. Planting, watering, harvesting. Mud bricks must be molded, aligned, and stacked with precision. Stones are lifted, placed, and balanced carefully. Rhythm is essential. Mistakes are noted, corrected, or punished. Supervisors patrol continuously, measuring output, posture, and compliance. Authority is constant, visible, and performative. Humor survives in small, fleeting moments, whispered jokes, subtle grins, exaggerated sights. But efficiency and survival dominate all else. The sun climbs higher, unrelenting. Sweat and dust form a coarse paste on your skin, sticky and abrasive. Natron and oils offer minimal relief. Shade is rare. Heat exhaustion, sunburn, and dehydration are ever-present threats. Crocodile-dung sunscreen may have existed historically. Historians still debate it. You smear anyway, grimacing and hoping instinct and ingenuity are enough to protect you. Your body moves automatically, every motion honed by repetition and necessity. Meals punctuate labor, but offer little comfort. Bread, lentils, occasional fish. Calories matter, flavor is incidental. Insects hover and land, dust coats every surface. Eating is functional, not pleasurable. Hydration and sustenance are carefully managed. Small errors have large consequences. Hierarchy dictates behavior. Supervisors enforce compliance, correct posture, and monitor output. Every glance, gesture, and word carries weight. Misjudging social cues can have serious consequences. Historians still argue about enforcement consistency, but for you, vigilance is constant and unavoidable. Social observation is as vital as physical endurance. By late afternoon, your body is depleted. Muscles ache, joints stiffen, focus wanes. Yet labor continues until tools are gathered, counts recorded, and rations distributed. The sun finally begins to set, offering relief. Shelter and dinner are minimal but restorative. Sleep will be brief, interrupted by insects, temperature swings, and awareness of tomorrow's demands. Humor and camaraderie remain small comforts, but they cannot undo the relentless cycle of survival. Lying on your mat, dust-crusted, muscles trembling, you reflect quietly on the lessons of endurance, adaptation, and attentiveness. Ancient Egypt is unrelenting, vivid, and exacting. Survival requires constant vigilance, subtle observation, an absolute commitment to rhythm. You rest only because you must, knowing the sun will rise again, indifferent and unforgiving. The final day you imagine in this relentless world begins like every other, the soft glow of dawn brushing the horizon while your body, already exhausted, protests its awakening. Every muscle, joint, and blistered fingertip reminds you that survival in ancient Egypt is not a matter of willpower alone. It is a combination of physical endurance, social awareness, and constant adaptation. Historians still argue whether the mental strategies laborers developed were as critical as physical conditioning, but after days immersed in this cycle, you feel that distinction vanish entirely. Pain has become a language, a teacher, and a guide, telling you when to push forward, when to adjust your posture, and when to conserve energy. Breakfast is, as always, functional dense bread, lentils, and a small sip of beer. Calories and hydration outweigh flavor. Each bite is carefully managed, each swallow a calculated measure against hunger and fatigue. Nile water beckons with its shimmering promise of relief. But you know better. Parasites, bacteria, and lurking crocodiles make it a gamble you cannot afford. Bear, thick and slightly sour, fills the same role more safely, offering hydration, modest calories, and an odd psychological comfort that the river cannot provide. Labor begins almost immediately. Fields must be tended, crops harvested or irrigated, bricks must be molded, aligned, and stacked, stones lifted and positioned with precision. Rhythm, repetition, and efficiency dominate your existence. Supervisors patrol continuously, monitoring posture, pace, and output. Authority is immediate, visible, and enforceable. Social awareness is a survival tool as critical as your own physical capacity. Humor survives in fleeting moments as a shared grin, a whispered joke, or a subtle exaggeration of exhaustion. But these moments are brief, subordinate to the unrelenting demands of work. The sun rises, merciless and unyielding. Sweat and dust create a gritty paste on your skin, sticky and abrasive. Natron and oils provide minimal protection. Heat, exhaustion, sunburn, and dehydration are constant threats, shaping every movement. Shadows are fleeting, and shade is rare. Crocodile-dung sunscreen may have been historically used. Historians still debate its prevalence. You smear anyway, trusting instinct and preparation over comfort. Meals are functional, repetitive, and minimally satisfying. Bread, lentils, occasional fish. Calories matter, flavor is negligible. Insects hover, dust coats every surface, and hygiene is scarce. Each meal is a strategic act of survival. Even nourishment is measured against time, energy, and risk. Hierarchy dominates every interaction. Supervisors correct mistakes, monitor output, and enforce compliance. Every gesture, glance, and tone carries weight. Misjudging social cues can lead to consequences, subtle or direct. Historians still argue about the variability of enforcement, but your lived experience confirms vigilance is constant. Social navigation is as critical as physical labor. By late afternoon, your body is a testament to accumulated strain. Muscles ache, joints throb, and attention wavers, but work continues. Tools are gathered, attendance counted, and rations distributed. The sun sets, providing partial relief. Shelter and dinner offer brief respite. Sleep arrives reluctantly, interrupted by insects, temperature fluctuations, and the anticipation of tomorrow's labor. Lying on your mat, muscles trembling, skin crusted with dust, you reflect on endurance, adaptation, and survival. Ancient Egypt is unrelenting, vivid, and exacting. Every day demands vigilance, rhythm, and awareness. Humor, ritual, and fleeting pleasures offer temporary relief, but survival requires consistency, attention, and quiet acceptance of hardship. You rest because you must, knowing the cycle will inevitably begin again. The sun has set, and the world softens into muted shadows. The Nile's distant murmur, the faint rustle of reeds, the subtle cries of night birds, all form a gentle symphony that eases your body into quiet. Imagine the heat fading, replaced by the soft cool of evening, the grit on your skin settling, the rhythmic breathing of nearby laborers blending with your own. You are tired, yes, but you have endured. Every ache is a reminder not of weakness, but of adaptation and persistence. You feel the lessons of ancient Egypt resonating. Endurance is more than physical strength. It is attentiveness, subtle social negotiation, and a constant respect for the forces, human, natural, and divine, that shape life. Allow your mind to drift, your muscles to relax, and your breath to slow. The world outside may have been harsh, but in this moment there is calm. Let the repetitive chants, the distant water, and the whispering wind carry you gently toward rest. The cycle will continue tomorrow, but for now there is only the quiet, the awareness of survival, and the tender rhythm of evening.